Os Estados Unidos e o mundo viveram uma segunda-feira de tensão com o medo de que a quebra de 2 bancos americanos gere um problema em todo o planeta.
Na tentativa de acalmar o povo americano, o presidente Biden se pronunciou logo pela manhã. Ele afirmou que todos terão de volta o dinheiro depositado nos bancos que faliram e que o sistema bancário do país é confiável.
Acabou de acontecer a maior falência de um banco nos Estados Unidos desde a crise de 2008. E se você for olhar para a crise de 2008, olha o que aconteceu com a nossa bolsa de valores, olha o que aconteceu com a família das pessoas, olha o que aconteceu com a economia de uma forma geral. Então sim, é uma situação delicada o que está acontecendo, é preocupante, os bancos americanos realmente eles estão com um grande problema nas mãos. E além de tudo, eu estou recebendo um monte de mensagem perguntando o que eu faço, meu dinheiro do Nubank, eu resgato o dinheiro do Nubank, o Nubank vai quebrar, o Inter vai quebrar, a C6 vai quebrar, a gente aqui no Brasil vai sofrer.
Será que o Nubank tá indo de comes e bebes? Isso porque a Cristina Junqueira, que é uma das pessoas-chave vinculadas ao Nubank, vendeu milhões e milhões de dólares em ações do Nubank. Ou seja, ela está se desfazendo das ações do Nubank.
As ações do Credit Suisse operavam em queda livre nesta quarta-feira, depois de seu principal acionista, o Banco Nacional Saudita, anunciar que não vai apoiar a instituição com o aumento da participação no capital. O título do segundo maior banco da Suíça chegou a desvalorizar 30% e estabeleceu uma nova mínima histórica de um franco suíço e 56 centavos.
Cerca de 100 startups de tecnologia correm o risco com a quebra de um banco do Vale do Silício nos Estados Unidos. A falência é a maior de uma instituição financeira no país desde a crise de 2008.
On the exact same day that we've witnessed the second largest bank failure in United States history, Wells Fargo experienced an unprecedented nationwide computer glitch that caused countless number of account holders to have incorrect balances and missing transactions. This is yet another example that demonstrates why it's never wise to put all of your eggs in one basket. If you have all of your money in just one bank, you may wake up one day and find that you are suddenly not able to access any of it. For years, I've been telling my readers to spread their assets around because our banking system is far more vulnerable than most people realize. In particular, I've never been a fan of Wells Fargo. A nationwide computer glitch at Wells Fargo left irate customers with incorrect balances and missing transactions Friday morning, sometimes dipping accounts into negative balances. Funds remain available, even though some customers' direct deposit transactions were not showing on their accounts, bank spokesman Josh Dunn said. Dunn did not say how many customers were impacted by the problem, did not provide a time when customers can expect the issue to be resolved, but he said Wells Fargo was working quickly on a resolution. As of 4:30 p.m. Friday, Dunn could not say when the problem would be resolved. The issue is one more reason people should keep cash on hand, one Twitter user wrote. Another tweeted, I do not like to feel massive panic immediately upon waking, but Wells Fargo decided to give me that gift this morning. Others anticipated Chase Bank and Bank of America would see an influx of unhappy Wells Fargo customers. JP Morgan Chase is the nation's largest bank by assets at $3.2 trillion, and Charlotte-based Bank of America is its second largest with $2.4 trillion in assets. Another Wells Fargo customer tweeted about definitely closing their account, using a SpongeBob meme to show how they felt, like they were begging for money. Wells Fargo is further proof to keep cash on hand for use. In the blink of an eye, a computer glitch or whatever, your funds are inaccessible. The number one thing that you should want from any bank is security. Right now, Wells Fargo seems to be severely lacking in this area. When users try to log into their online banking apps, they received a very alarming message. It's not clear what might be causing the direct deposit issue or when it might be resolved, but Wells Fargo posted a message at the top of its online banking app saying, if you see incorrect balances or missing transactions, this may be due to a technical issue and we apologize. Needless to say, a lot of account holders were not pleased. Of course, those that have their money in Silicon Valley Bank are in much worse shape. Rumors had caused a huge run on the bank in recent days. Regulators moved very quickly on Friday to permanently shut it down. The FDIC said in a press release that SVB was closed on Friday by the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, which in turn appointed FDIC as the receiver of all insured deposits of the bank. Those that have less than $250,000 deposited with SVB will be covered by FDIC insurance. But as I detailed in a video that we posted yesterday, the vast majority of the funds deposited with SVB are not covered by FDIC insurance. Some depositors are literally in danger of losing millions of dollars, and that should deeply alarm all of us. Meanwhile, there are now rumors that another major bank on the West Coast may be in jeopardy. Concerns have quickly shifted to other banks that might be in trouble. First Republic, another West Coast-based bank whose shares are down more than 30% since Wednesday, tried to reassure investors. In an unusual statement midday Friday, it said tech companies only account for 4% of its deposits and that less than 15% of its total assets are invested in securities like bonds. Is this the start of a new financial crisis? Some experts that were interviewed by CNN claim that this is not the case. Billionaire hedge fund manager Bill Ackman has compared SVB to Bear Stearns, the first lender to collapse at the start of the 2007-2008 global financial crisis. The risk and failure and deposit losses here is that the next least well-capitalized bank faces a run and fails, and the dominoes continue to fall, Ackman wrote on Twitter. Yet most analysts say the implosion of SVB appears company-specific for now. A crucial lender to U.S. technology startups, the bank came under pressure as Silicon Valley funding dried up, the result of an economic slowdown and rapidly rising interest rates. The reason SVB is in trouble is because they have exposure to particular industries, said Jonas Gulterman, Deputy Chief Markets Economist at Capital Economics. Most other banks, he added, are more diversified. Federal regulators are paying attention to this particular financial institution, and when we think about the broader financial system, we're very confident in the ability and the resilience of the system, he told CNN in an exclusive interview. The comments come after Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen convened an unscheduled meeting of financial regulators to discuss the implosion of Silicon Valley Bank, a major lender to the hurting tech sector. We have the tools that are necessary to deal with incidents like what's happened to Silicon Valley Bank, Adeyemo said. There's also less anxiety about the stability of the banking sector due to the significant regulatory reforms put in place after the crisis in 2008. Still, SVB's collapse reveals stresses created by the fastest jump in borrowing costs in decades. Central banks have raised interest rates to tame high inflation, but the pace of the increases has thrown up unexpected problems. But worries persist about further unintended consequences. For example, banks that scooped up.
Você já reparou que nos momentos de muita pressão, você se torna uma pessoa muito mais produtiva? Quando o tempo está acabando, parece...
U.S. Treasuries and other bonds, when interest rates were very low, are now sitting on losses as borrowing costs have risen and bond prices have gone down. Mike Mayo, senior bank analyst at Wells Fargo, said the crisis at SVB might be an idiosyncratic situation. This is night and day versus the global financial crisis from 15 years ago, he told CNN's Julia Chatley Friday. Back then, he said, banks were taking excessive risks, and people thought everything was fine. Now, everyone's concerned, but underneath the surface, the banks are more resilient than they've been in a generation. Similarly, former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers told Bloomberg News Friday that he saw no systemic risk if the situation is handled reasonably, adding he had every reason to think that it will be. In a sign concerns are spilling into other parts of the banking sector, shares of other lenders have been falling too. JP Morgan Chase, JPM, Bank of America, BAC, Wells Fargo, WFC, and Citigroup, C, all suffered drops of between 4% and 7% on Thursday. While their shares stabilized on Friday, smaller banks continue to suffer. An exchange-traded fund tracking regional banks, the S&P Regional Banking ETF, was down more than 6%. Banks in Europe were also hit. Overall, the banking system is in good shape and able to withstand significant shocks, said Jens Hagendorf, a finance professor at King's College London. I think SVB is special in the sense that they have a fickle depositor base. You can believe them if you want, but as I explained earlier, SVB got into trouble because they were sitting on mountains of treasury bills that rapidly lost value once the Fed started aggressively hiking interest rates. Unfortunately, there are lots of other banks that are in the exact same position. The financial day of reckoning that I've been warning about for a very long time appears to be rapidly approaching, and most Americans are not prepared for it at all. So if you have all of your money in a single institution, or if you have more than $250,000 in a single bank, I would encourage you to consider taking action while you still can. At this point, I'm sorry to report, no one is in a position to stop anything. Markets can be ferocious under these conditions. Markets are not all-knowing, but once they lose trust, there is no stopping the stampede of incredulity. There is no one at the Fed who can stop it, and no wise managers at the top who can patch things up. Take note of the collapse of bank stocks only hours after regulators took over SVB. My friends, we could be in for a wild ride.
The wait for the next Lehman Brothers moment is over. On Friday, we witnessed the second biggest bank failure in U.S. history. The stunning collapse of Silicon Valley Bank is shaking the financial world to the core. At the end of last year, the bank had $175 billion in deposits, and approximately $151 billion of those deposits were uninsured. In other words, a lot of wealthy individuals and large companies are in danger of being wiped out. In particular, this is being described as an extinction-level event for tech startups, because thousands of them did their banking with SVB. I cannot even begin to describe how cataclysmic this is going to be for the tech industry as a whole. There is so much to cover, so let me try to take this one step at a time. Rumors of trouble at SVB had sparked a massive bank run in recent days, and regulators moved quickly on Friday to permanently shut the bank down and took control of its deposits. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation announced Friday in what is the largest U.S. bank failure since the global financial crisis more than a decade ago. The collapse of SVB, a key player in the tech and venture capital community, leaves companies and wealthy individuals largely unsure of what will happen to their money. We haven't seen anything like this in a very long time. In fact, it is being reported that this is the second biggest bank failure in all of U.S. history. The closure marks the biggest bank failure since the 2008 financial crisis and the second largest in U.S. history after Washington Mutual collapsed during that industry-wide meltdown, according to FDIC data. As at the end of December, the Santa Clara, California-based bank, the 16th largest bank in the country, had $209 billion in assets with more than $175 billion in deposits. As with other FDIC member banks, SVB deposits are insured up to $250,000 per depositor. Worries over a run at SVB led Wall Street investors to dump other bank stocks as well. Shares of some prominent West Coast lenders took sharp nosedives on Friday, including First Republic Bank, PacWest Bancorp, and Western Alliance Bank Corporation. The good news is that anyone that had less than $250,000 in the bank will be covered by FDIC insurance. The FDIC standard insurance covers up to $250,000 per depositor per bank for each account ownership category. The FDIC said uninsured depositors will get receivership certificates for their balances. The regulator said it will pay uninsured depositors an advance dividend within the next week, with potential additional dividend payments as the regulator sells SVB's assets. Whether depositors with more than $250,000 ultimately get all their money back will be determined by the amount of money the regulator gets as it sells Silicon Valley assets or if another bank takes ownership of the remaining assets. There were concerns in the tech community that until that process unfolds, some companies may have issues making payroll. Unfortunately, as we noted before, while the FDIC noted that SVB had $175 billion in deposits as of December 31st, note that some $151.5 billion of these are uninsured, which means they get exactly zero, although a sizable number of them likely pulled their deposits in the past few days. As SVB assets are liquidated, hopefully those that had uninsured deposits at SVB will eventually see some of their money. But for now, many of them are facing a complete and total nightmare. For example, one tech CEO named Ashley Turner is freaking out because she had at least $10 million deposited with SVB and has been frantically calling her banker. She said, "It has been the worst 18 hours of my life." Can you imagine how she must be feeling at this moment? Sadly, she is far from alone. The CEO of Y Combinator, Gary Tan, says that what we are looking at is an extinction-level event for tech startups. There are thousands of U.S. startups that banked at SVB, often as their sole bank. $250,000 per account is not going to last long. The number one pressing issue for these startups is payroll. You can't have people work if you can't pay them. This means mass furlough. It might mean thousands of startups die before the FDIC gets through its receivership process and releases the funds. From what I hear, there are venture debt options coming from providers like Brex, but we're going to need a lot of options in order to avoid a mass shutdown of all American startups in the next few weeks. This is an extinction-level event for startups and will set startups and innovation back by 10 years or more. Another example of a firm directly impacted, and its staff and clients, comes from Parker Conrad, CEO of HR IT finance firm Rippling, facing payroll problems. So it's not just rich venture capitalist folks who could be suffering. It's real-world businesses and their clients and employees who are feeling the direct pinch of SVB's failure today. I wish that I could tell you that he is wrong, but I cannot.
Politically, the tide is turning, and people all over the world are now rejecting the New World Order. The Central Bank of Nigeria launched their CBDC a little over a year ago, but the people rejected it. So early this year, the Nigerian banks emptied the ATM machines and closed their doors. This resulted in angry protests. The people attacked ATMs and blocked roads in multiple cities. The Bank of Lebanon has crashed. The Lebanese pound has fallen to an all-time low of 80,000 against the US dollar. The people have taken to the streets. Banks have been set on fire. The rise in Fed rates has officially killed America's biggest lender, Silicon Valley Bank. The FDIC shutters Silicon Valley Bank. $152 billion of uninsured deposits are destroyed. The rise in Fed rates also killed Silvergate Capital. Several regional bank stocks have plummeted as a result of the Silicon Valley Bank and the Federal Reserve's rate hikes. The housing market is collapsing as well. The majority of commercial real estate loans are lent by small banks. Massive short bets are now happening in the commercial real estate market. The Federal Reserve Bank is taking down the housing market along with all regional banks, leaving only its vassals who will be distributing CBDCs as a solution. The financial experts are now recommending that people have food, gold and silver, and cash in their possession.
It affects everybody, you know. And so I started studying in history, and I found out the same thing happened on March 3rd, 1933. Roosevelt did the exact same thing for the exact same reason, leading to the exact same result. And so studying past periods that didn't happen in my lifetime, like we haven't been through a war before, and we haven't been through a civil war, or we haven't been in the circumstances. So the three big things that are happening in our lifetimes that we have not been through before are the creation of an enormous amount of debt and printing of money to monetize the debt. That's number one. And so we'll talk about inflation and where we are in that cycle. And I'm like a mechanic. I'm not ideological. I'm just like, what are the cause-effect relationships? How does that dynamic work mechanistically? But it produces inflation. The second, but very interrelated to this, is the large internal conflicts that we are having. Populism of the left and populism of the right, and values differences that is producing a conflict, brought about also by the largest wealth gap differences, largest opportunity gap differences, and so on. That type of conflict I have never seen in my life, but that also happened in the 1930 to 45 period. And so I needed to go back and then study that over time. And then the third is the great power conflict. When 1945, when this world order began, as all world orders, there's a war, there's a dominant power. The dominant power sets the rules. And when the dominant power sets the rules, then you have a period of peace and prosperity. And so the United States in 1945 had 80% of the world's money. It had half of world GDP. It had a monopoly on the military power. And so we came into the American world order. That gap, that power gap, has shrunk to be approximately equal with the other side. And we're having a great power conflict. So you have to go back to that period of time. And I've seen that period of time happen repeatedly. When these three things happen repeatedly, it's a very dangerous set of circumstances. So we are in a position on the financial one to be in a position where you cannot raise living standards by raising money and credit. In other words, if you increase money, then the value of money is going to go down. And one man's debts are another man's assets. And so when they get negative returns by holding a debt asset, they're going to sell that debt asset, and that produces a problem. And that's over a period of time. And so the Romans, for example, put less gold into gold coins. And so you saw it in its way, and that certainly produces kind of the inflation, because you can't raise living standards by printing more money. So we have that going on. And so there's that dynamic of where is a storehold of wealth? The purpose of a currency is two purposes: a medium of exchange and a storehold of wealth. A storehold of wealth means you buy its debt and its assets, and you can save in it. And people believe that cash is a safe investment, but they're seeing that what happens is it's losing buying power. And it will lose buying power. So they start to realize it's not a safe investment. Inflation over the last year, about 8%. Interest rates were nothing. And so there was an 8% change in buying power. That kinds of changes and sort of reinforces the inflation cycle. We pay too much attention to one currency in relationship to another currency, and not enough attention to the fact that those aren't the choices. It's a choice for transactions, but it's not a choice for storehold of wealth. So if you're holding European euros and euro-denominated debt, and you're getting a negative interest rate or thereabouts, and the same is true in Japan, and you're not making up with inflation, none of those are good. And like in the 30s, they all depreciated, they all went down in relationship to goods and services and other asset prices. So what you see is all the currencies along those lines are sort of tied to each other, and they're bad storeholds of wealth, and that's why you see moves to other assets. It pays to borrow, or if not borrow, but put your money into assets that maintain buying power. So you see it happen in all the different ways. So look at whether what you're holding in the form of that cash denominated, and that'll be a debt instrument. That's how you hold the currency in order to have a storehold of wealth. Look at its real returns. The Fed understands, and central banks know, that when inflation is undesirably high and the economy is relatively strong, you put on the brakes. And that when the reverse is the case, you put on the gas. And they've made liquidity so abundant that not only didn't you have to pay interest on your debt, but you didn't have to pay principal on your debt, because they would have interest-only loans, and they would have low covenants, like it's easy to not meet your debt requirement. Companies borrow, individuals borrow, interest-only loans, and when there's no interest rate, it basically means the stuff is free. You can buy houses, you can buy all sorts of things on that basis. And the world has adapted to that, and they did that at a very low real interest rate, a very low interest rate relative to inflation. And then they printed a lot more of that money, and so on. And so inflation is going up. So mechanistically, what that means is now we have a lot more debt, and we have an economy and markets, financial markets, that the pricing is structured based on those very low interest rates and that amount of liquidity. So when you go through the calculations, when I go through the calculations, and I figure a high enough level of interest rate to provide a decent real return is, for a holder of the debt, is much too high of an interest rate for the markets and the economy. But you're going to have an inflation rate that's above the interest rates, and that's not going to be desirable, so investors want to sell that. And you can see it as interest rates rise, you can see its effects on markets. You can see the effects on the capital markets. So you see the stock market going down while the bond market is going down. And that means most everything that people own practically are going down practically because most people are in stocks and bonds, that kind of thing. The Fed's trade-off is going to be very difficult. Right now, they have a very restrictive monetary policy plan. I judge that by the supply and the demand for credit. So the federal government is going to run large deficits. So that means they will have to sell debt. They'll sell treasury bills and bonds. The Federal Reserve is planning to sell $1.1 trillion of debt also. Private investors are inclined, pension funds and so on. They're losing money while there's inflation, so they're losing buying power. They're selling. And there's a selling imbalance. And that selling imbalance means, because it has to balance with the buyers, that means a contraction in private credit, which means a recession. So as I look through this, we're in a tightening phase where it's beginning to bite, but it's not really, it's barely begun because the actual rises in short rates have barely begun. It started, the other things are rising. And that trade-off between growth and inflation is going to be very difficult. And that's why I believe that we've entered a period of stagflation, quite like the 1970s. And then we can't look at it alone. We have to look at it in light of the two other big forces. In other words, the internal conflict force. We don't have enough money. And we don't have enough real money. We have plenty of fiat money because we can print it. But you don't have enough real money. And everybody says we need to spend money on this thing and that. And I don't even disagree with that. When I look at the social conditions and the infrastructure, and I look at, okay, Ukraine, and do we need to rebuild the Ukraine? Do we need to have greater military expenditures? Do we need to have these things? But we don't ask, how much money do we have to spend? And so because of the nature of that, even just the costliness, we need to take care of the environment. But it's going to be expensive when we take care of the environment because we haven't yet fully developed the technologies that are fully cost effective in order to do that. So I think that that's the mechanical description of where we are in a political environment. So as we have inflation, that's going to be a big political thing. And it's going to cause greater polarity. There's a risk that neither side accepts losing because of the populism. And you put more financial strain and things get worse. Conditions are likely to be significantly worse, for example, in 2024 than they are now. Just take a normal economic cycle and where you are. It has the form together of what is money. I mean, it's Genesis. What is money? And how can we not only digitalize it, which makes it to some extent efficient, but also the real questions. Can it maintain value so it will not be depreciated by central banks? That's a key thing. Can it be transferred, used all around the world, accepted for purchases and sales all around the world? Then it has to do with issues like, can it be private? There's a saying in gold's case, which is, it's the only financial asset that you can own that is private and you can move around, that isn't dependent on somebody paying you money, paying you something. So as a medium of exchange. Crypto, those in a fiat world naturally becomes a alternative, a consideration. And the fact that it's gone on something like Bitcoin, I guess about 11 years, and it hasn't been hacked and it, is working in that way, has its particular appeal. It has big issues. It's not a private asset. It is easily outlawed. It doesn't constitute a high enough percentage of wealth. It's like right now, for example, Bitcoin's worth maybe $700 billion or so, which makes it a small asset by comparison to a lot of things like Microsoft is worth more than crypto is. And so it hasn't reached those particular stages. I think that people are grappling for what the new money will be in this environment. And I think we don't know yet what the new money is. I think we're going to see different countries put out their different versions of digital currencies, and then there will be private assets and gold will play a role. The important thing is we have entered an era, which will carry us through the next number of years, of what is the money that is widely accepted as a medium of exchange and a viable storehold of wealth.
Now, this is something I want you to understand, and you need to listen carefully because this is profoundly important. Most people have never heard this and don't even understand what I'm trying to say. So try and follow what I'm going to tell you. Now, on the back of the Social Security card will be numbers in red. On the front will be in blue or black, but on the back will be in red. The numbers on the back of a Social Security card in red designate your body. It is the serial number of your stock. And this is why if you're wealthy, you are preferred stock. If you're poor, you are common stock. But you are a stock on the stock market. Your body is bought and sold through the use of your birth certificate. This is why when you were born, you have to have a birth certificate. Therefore, your birth certificate is signed by your mother. And where your mother signed on the birth certificate, you will see it does not say parent or mother, it says informant. You need to wake up and find out how this stuff really works. After the change of the century, coming into 1900s, decided they wanted to expand. They got so much money and they're doing so well, they thought maybe we could expand the business, move the corporation out a little bit. Let's expand business. Let's go to Germany or Europe and open up a big corporation there. And take in their corporation, their government. We'll take them over. And the Germans said, "Hey, Jack, it's like a mafia. What are you coming over here? You're gonna buy me? I'll buy you. You don't buy me." Like the Godfather movie. And the American corporation, British American corporation, said, unfortunately, maybe you didn't understand. Let me restate it so you understand. I didn't ask you. I'm telling you. We're moving in here. It's called a corporate takeover. And so there was a hostile corporate takeover where the American corporation decided they wanted to take over in Europe and they didn't want to be taken over. Well, it's too bad. They took over anyway. So they called it a hostile corporate takeover. We call it World War I. So the corporation called United States was able to overthrow the existing corporate order in Europe, but it cost a lot of money. They had to build a lot of tanks and jeeps and pay a lot of people. And the corporation, well, they were successful. They did what they wanted to do. But they went broke doing it. And so when they went broke doing it, and then the bankers pulled their money out in 29, we had something called a stock market crash. Because the corporation spent so much money, they went broke. So the international banker says, well, if you're broke, what are you coming to me for? I'm not going to loan you money if you're broke. And so what do you have as collateral? You got any collateral that you can put up for me to loan you the money? And the corporation called United States, the British corporation called United States, said, yes, we have the stock. We'll give you stock in the company. You are the stock in the corporation. So they give your body to the banks in Switzerland. So your body now becomes stock for the corporation called United States because you are a moneymaker. Bankers came in and said, if we're going to loan you money, you guys have lost money. You guys have gone bankrupt. We're going to take care of the accounting. We're going to see where the money goes. We'll give you the money, but we're going to make sure it goes where we want it to go. So they set up the Federal Reserve System and then the collection agency to make damn sure that you people pay us. We're going to set up to keep a record of how much you owe us in business each week. We're going to call it the Federal Reserve. And to make sure that your stock, all the chumps out there in America working, make sure the stock pays us. We're going to make sure they pay us. You don't just tell me you're going to pay. I'm going to make sure they're going to pay. So we will set up a collection agency. Our own personal collection agency is called the Internal Revenue. So the banks, the corporation called United States, loan money to the privately owned corporation called United States. And the United States corporation gave your body, your birth certificate, to the banks as collateral for the loan. And that's why today Americans are nothing but slaves. Now this is something I want you to understand. And you need to listen carefully because this is profoundly important. Most people have never heard this and don't even understand what I'm trying to say. But try and follow what I'm going to tell you. There are two kinds of law on the earth, as I've said. One is called civil law, which is the law of the land, and one is called maritime admiralty, which is called the law of water. Maritime admiralty is banking law. And the law on the maritime admiralty says that you, because you came out of your mother's water, are a maritime admiralty product. This is why the ship is sitting in its berth and is tied to the dock, and the captain has to give a certificate of manifest to the port authorities because money is changing hands. This is why when you were born, you have to have a birth certificate. It's got to be signed by the dock because that's where the ship is tied to, is the dock. So the dock signs your birth certificate. Why? Because you came down out of your mother's water. You came down her birth canal. You are a maritime admiralty product, and therefore your birth certificate is signed by your mother. And where your mother signed on the birth certificate, get it, you will see it does not say parent or mother, it says informant. Your mother was informing the bank that she has just produced another product to be bought and sold. England, the British Crown, through international banking, owns your physical body. And that's the law. So you can think it's funny all you want. So the bottom line is that you are a maritime admiralty product. And on the back of the Social Security card will be numbers in red. On the front will be in blue or black, but on the back will be in red. The numbers on the back of a Social Security card in red designate your body. It is the serial number of your stock. And this is why if you're wealthy, you are preferred stock. If you're poor, you are common stock. But you are a stock on the stock market. Your body is bought and sold through the use of your birth certificate. And if you could get your original birth certificate back, you would find that on the back of the birth certificate are all the banks around the world. All over the world, banks have used your birth certificate because you are a stock in a maritime admiralty banking scheme where you make money for banks. So consequently, the corporation and government, people who want to control you, they create a second you, and that second you that they control, that they created, is all capital letters. Check it out. Anytime you get a bill, get a lawsuit, you're going to find a ticket. Somebody sends you a bill from the Department of Water and Power. Check it out on your driver's license, on your Social Security card, on your insurance cards. Anything having to do with business, your name will always be all capital letters, because only all capital letters can be dealt with by banks and government. Anytime you have a name upper or lowercase, that applies to you. I got no control over you. You sign a contract in which your name is in all capital letters, now I can take you to court. Now I can take it. As a matter of fact, the judge sits on the bench. He rules from the bench. The word bench in Latin is a bank. Look it up in a Latin dictionary. So the judge rules from the bench. Right, because he's ruling for the bank. Why? Because somebody's going to pay. It's just a game here. The Queen of England wants a cut of the American blood. She wants a piece. So it's going, somebody's going to pay, and the money's going to go where? Into a bank. That's right. The judge rules of the bank. So consequently, if you are working in California making money, you are then referred to as a franchisee. You're a franchisee of a foreign corporation. 1849 Constitution of California says, no California citizen will ever pay taxes in California state. Ever. There will never be a state tax in California. Ever. That's the Constitution of California. But if you say that you're a United States citizen, you're saying you work for a privately owned corporation called United States. Therefore, you are a franchisee of a foreign corporation. Therefore, you must pay the California Franchise Tax Board. Not California State Tax Board. There is no state tax in California. You pay the California Franchise Tax Board because you're a franchisee of a foreign corporation under maritime banking law, international law. You work for the Queen of England. Your butt is owned by the Queen of England in a corporation called United States, while a man called Bush is the president of the British corporation. You need to wake up and find out how this stuff really works. Because once you understand that you don't need to submit yourself as an American to a British commercial venture called courts. You're an American. You don't need to go to court. You only go to court because you agreed to go to court. When they send you a subpoena to court or summons to court, or they've sent you something, you look at it and say, hey, Jack, that's not me. That's in all capital letters. All capital letters is a corporation. It's a corpse. It's dead. Do I look like I'm dead to you? No, I'm an American, Jack. I ain't dead. And besides, I'll go to an American system for justice. I don't need no British Grand Lodge Masonic system called courts. This British Grand Lodge Masonic system called Inns of Court comes out of England, and it has manipulated, exploited, and lied to the people, and everybody in America thinks they got to go to court. Oh, the judge is, they've sent me something that I've got to go to court. I don't go to anybody's court. I'm an American. I don't need to go to court. That's the difference between being a free man and a slave.
Nothing in this world works the way you think it does. Nothing. There's a far higher, bigger picture going on the earth for at least 7,000 years of human history that we modern day people really just don't relate to. All we know is what we live with today. The hidden history of the world we live in. For 3,200 years, Rome has dominated Europe. And for 3,200 years, Europe has dominated the world. Therefore, there is the old saying that all roads lead to Rome. Just keep in mind that what you are seeing happening on the earth today, with all the economic problems, etc., all has a pedigree and all has a background which you need to understand. Our commercial systems, our educational systems, are all based on ancient concepts and belief systems. Knowledge is power. And this is why so many people in America especially feel powerless, because they have no knowledge. Profound things have been said in the Bible. For instance, it is written in the Old Testament that my people are dying from a lack of knowledge. And that's certainly true. Today people are dying, they're wasting their lives away because they're ignorant, ill-informed, and unread as to how the world works. And there's another scripture that I think is extremely important that says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Simply meaning that as long as civilization does not understand where we have come from, where we are now, and where is the whole human race going in the future, if you don't have that kind of spiritual vision, then we're going to perish. Educate yourself about how the world really works. Banks do not loan money. There's a law in America that says no bank can loan money, period. That's the law. Now, how many people go to get a loan from a bank know that the law in America says no banks can loan money? How many people know that? The way it works is very simple. Suppose you're buying a $30,000 car, $50,000 car. That car, first of all, has to be appraised by a state-approved appraiser. So you have a government appraiser appraise the car for its value. And let's say it's $50,000. Therefore, the paperwork, which represents that $50,000 car, is referred to in commerce and business as commercial paper. And that piece of paper represents $50,000 in business. So what happens is if you decide you want to buy the car, the dealership sends the paper to the bank. So now the bank has a $50,000 worth of commercial paper. What the bank does is they open up a bank account in your name without you knowing it. All banks do this. They open up a bank account in your name. They sign your name on the bank account because you can't open a bank account without a signature. So they sign your name on a bank account and open up a bank account for you. But you don't know that. Then they take the $50,000 in commercial paper, which represents $50,000, and they put it into your account. So now you have a bank account in their bank with $50,000 in it. And then they take that bank account and they write a check on that for you. So the first check, for the first $50,000, they write for you, and they sign it for you and give it to you so you can give it to the dealer. So you think the bank has loaned you $50,000. No. The bank merely gave you credit on the commercial paper, which they're holding. They are confirming that they have the $50,000 in the bank with the paper. They're holding the pink slip. Therefore, they will give you a credit of $50,000 based on your commercial paper. So they didn't give you anything. You gave them $50,000 on commercial paper. They just gave you a credit. And so that's the way it works. There is no money changing hands. Now let me give you another example that's even easier to understand. Suppose you were a painting contractor, and I hire you to paint my office, and you tell me it's going to cost $100 to paint my office. Well, the way it works in business, in commercial business, is that I agree to your bill of $100. So when you're through with the job, you come to me and you give me a bill, and the bill is for $100. I reach in my wallet and I pull out a $100 bill, and I give it to you. Now you have been paid because I gave you a $100 bill. No, I didn't pay you anything. I paid you nothing. You gave me a bill for $100. I reach in my wallet, I give you a bill for $100. It's called a $100 bill. So now you owe me $100. It's a bill. Look on the $100 bill, and at the top it says a Federal Reserve note. It's a bank note, meaning you now owe me $100. It's a bank note. And so if you had given me a bill for $20, I give you a $20 bill. So all we're doing is just exchanging bills. That's why banks are called banks of exchange. So we're just exchanging paper. Nobody has bought anything. And because of that, the law basically says in America, you cannot pay a bill. So understand, when you say that you've got a bill that you have to pay, you cannot pay a bill in America. That's the law. But you can discharge a debt. That's different. Discharging a debt is different from paying a bill. Since you didn't pay for anything, since you're using the Federal Reserve note and you're buying something, you did not pay. You didn't pay the bill. So therefore, whatever it is you're buying, you don't own. You don't own anything. It was just a bill of exchange. They give you something worth $100 bill, and I gave them a bill for $100. So the bottom line on the way commerce works is that nobody pays anyone, period. Therefore, in point of fact, by law, no one owns anything. Also is why you have to have insurance and a seatbelt. It's because you do not own your body. The government owns your body, in point of fact. And so your body is a security on the New York Stock Exchange, and the corporation that owns you, and you are owned. There are laws that expressly say that you are owned. You just don't know it.